right, we are back for our next video in the series about how Christians should vote, and today is one of the spicier ones, I would say.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at each of the two major parties and looking at their platforms and comparing them to Scripture so that we can vote in an informed way as Christians.
Yep.
And just before we get started, I think it's important to say that our desire, our heart for this video is not to tell you which candidate you should vote for, but we do commend you to think biblically about this choice you have in the election and your right to vote. You have an opportunity to hopefully benefit the country by helping us move in a direction that is better. And so, we just want to help you think biblically, think carefully about this, and not only think in a, secular sense about your voting decision. And
so I think so many people just want like the right answer, right?
Yeah.
So you read a book and you're like, this person's the expert on this. I don't want to hear 5 views. I just want to hear the right view. Well, that's a bad way to think, especially when it comes to political issues, how to live as a Christian. We're wanting to point you to Scripture, help you to think about these things biblically. That's our goal. So that means you got to engage your mind, and you have to be aware of when you're maybe being lied to by a politician, or when a policy might sound really good, but it conflicts with Scripture.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing to note is that there is room for disagreement among Christians. I mean, there is actually a pretty wide array of different positions Christians hold on a lot of these issues.
Yeah.
And so, just to know that, we're not coming with this is the right answer or else you're not a Christian or something like that. So, and also before we dive in, we should say there's a lot more to these platforms than we can get through in a relatively short video. So we're not going to get through every point.
Great. So some caveats, right? So one of the challenges to voting is actually trying to determine whether the person you're voting for will do what they say they're going to do. So you may have someone who is promising you a lot, and you may not vote for them because you realize they're not going to be able to do what they say, or they won't follow through on what they say. I remember when we were voting for class president when I was in first grade, someone promised free candy from all the vending machines. Did not deliver, but I voted for her. It sounded great to me. So since then, I've thought a little more carefully, right? And then also, you may have someone who they say something in their campaign, but you don't believe they're actually going to do it, and that could be a reason to vote for them, because you're saying, well, they're just trying to appease this side. So it's often very hard. So we're just going to look, though, just at what the parties claim they're for, what they're saying, and we'll try to go through some of the big topics. So we won't have time to deal with things like foreign policy, criminal justice. There's a couple of huge areas that we're not going to be able to get to. But what I'll say is at the beginning is both platforms of both parties have a more expansion vision for what government should be than what Scripture does. The Scripture does not envision, we don't see in Scripture this vision for a government that is involved in every area of life like our government is, and is constantly growing and is constantly, I think, overburdening our population with a lot of things. So both parties seem to view the government as your parent. The Republicans less so, the Democrats more so, right? But both are wanting to spend a lot, wanting to provide kind of for everything we need from cradle to the grave. We shouldn't see government as our God, right? Government's not here to give you hope or to give you joy or any of those buzzwords. And if you're looking to either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump to give you that, you're a very foolish person. And you need God, you need a church, right? You need family, you need things that actually will give you true joy in your life. It's not going to be through a bureaucrat that lives far away. And government is not meant to accomplish everything under the sun. Government has narrow roles according to Scripture. It's to defend the innocent, to uphold justice, and sometimes force is used for that, right? We see that in Genesis chapter 9, where God says, if you shed man's blood, by man shall your blood be shed. This is the first institution of government. And then in Romans 13, we see the same thing in the New Testament, that government bears the sword. So this means having borders and protecting them. It means fighting just wars. But we have to be careful not to define justice so broadly that it means everything, right? In our world of critical theory and things like that, we have this idea of justice as if it's about achieving cosmic justice, about perfecting the world and going back in history and figuring out who, with what skin color, did what thing to what person, and then, taking from one and giving to another to remedy that. That's craziness. We're talking about justice through protection of rights, not through actively giving things to people to try to balance the scales of cosmic justice. And then, so defending the innocent, upholding justice, and securing freedom for people, giving people the ability to work, to have a flourishing life, right? So really, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is a good way of putting it. In our American system, got it right in that regard. So, and especially the freedom of religion should be a central concern of government. So let's get into some of these issues. Now we'll actually kind of read from some of these platforms. I got to say, the Republican Party platform, it was maybe 20 pages long. And it was funny because they had like 20 bullet points at the beginning of their main goals, and they were all written in capitals, like as if Donald Trump had just typed them out on his Twitter or whatever. And it had some just funny things, like it had like "drill, baby, drill," So it's like
in the platform,
was it written? Yeah. And then the Democratic platform was 120 pages or something. It was just mind-numbing. I mean, both of them were not entertaining, but it's just funny even the differences of how they kind of framed it.
Yeah.
But let's talk about economics, okay? So both parties lead their platforms with economic issues because both parties know that that's the main concern of the voter, right? As you know, whether that should be or not, maybe it's a different conversation. But this is what the Democratic platform says. They say, now it's time to finish the job. Democrats know that most folks fundamentally want the same thing, not a handout, but a fair shot, which is interesting because then the Democratic platform basically lists a whole bunch of handouts for people. And it really focuses on redistributing wealth. It kind of avoids that at first. It's interesting. But as you get on, it says, in the wealthiest nation on earth, we all benefit when we help one another. That's great. That's very true, right? We're called by Scripture to help each other. What Democrats mean by that is they mean taking money from one person and giving it to another. Hey, you have $100. That person has $10. We're going to take from you and give to them. So it says Democrats will keep working to build an economy that rewards work, not wealth, where we care for the most vulnerable and unleash the potential that all our children have to grow and thrive. We remain committed to fighting poverty and enabling all Americans to live up to their God-given potential. So this is what they say. It sounds really, really good, but when you read through their policies, it's a lot of things about different programs, and especially protecting programs from being removed. So Democrats kind of historically have been this way for a long time, but always about adding new programs. And there's so many good things about that, good intentions to that, but it's outside the scope of government. It's much more in the scope of just neighborliness, and good churches and things like this are supposed to be helping their communities. It shouldn't be that we all go to a federal government that runs really inefficiently to do those things. I don't know if we could say it's, evil because of that, but it's just not really biblical. Now, on the Republican side, Republicans are basically just a toned down version of the same thing. Like they're not, they focus a little more on tax cuts, but there's not a whole lot about how we're going to cut spending in our federal government or diminish the size of the federal government. It's really just kind of like they're going in the same direction as the Democrats at a slower pace.
Yeah, slightly different priorities as far as what spending goes towards as well.
That's true.
Like military spending is a big deal for the Republican Party platform. So
very true. Yeah, it's fun that both platforms had things about making our military the strongest in the world. Which is, it's funny because when you get to this point in the election, everyone's trying to kind of be in the middle, right? So there's a lot of things that I saw. I'm like, wow, it's really maybe not the priority you hear about all year long from this party or that party, but it's what they're going to emphasize here. So when it comes to taxes, right? Again, tax cuts for Republicans, at least that's kind of the whole no taxes on tips, whatever, appealing to those just normal middle class workers. And then for the Democrats, they say President Biden's plan will cut taxes for middle class and low income Americans, and will finance those cuts by making the ultra wealthy and big corporations finally start paying their fair share. Fair share. You're going to hear that a lot from the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And really, when you look at, and again, this is true of both parties, just to different degrees, but when we have this mindset of those people over there have more than me, so we're going to take from those people and give it to people like me and others who are poor, this is a bad imitation of what the Scripture says is our responsibility. The Scripture says that you should be a generous person, that you should give generously to those who are in need. It's much easier, though, to pretend to feel generous by taking someone else's money and giving it to the poor. But don't fool yourself and think that you are doing that, fulfilling that command by taking from someone else. And often what this amounts to is nothing more than envy, the 10th commandment, right? Coveting what someone else has and saying, well, they have more, they shouldn't have it. I should have it or someone else should have it. And it's stealing. To simply continuously vote for more and more taxes on other people because you want what they have, that's stealing. It's just in a slightly more culturally acceptable form. So again, both parties are in the same general boat, but there's different degrees for sure. Any thoughts on that? Sorry, I'm going.
Yeah, no, I mean,
here.
I guess maybe I don't know if we have time for this, but let me just ask about Romans 13, for instance, tells us we need to pay taxes to the government. And so that's an expectation, I guess, that governments do have taxes and we're expected to pay them. Yep. So would you say the difference is, I guess, the tax policy in terms of how those taxes are distributed? Should it be like an even distribution, or do you have some sort of, I guess, guideline of what you think would be more appropriate for a government to do?
I mean, we totally, we have, scriptural commands to pay taxes. We submit to government, all those things we talked about last week, very important. I think just some of the general principles I would see in Scripture are when God is instituting his policies for giving in ancient Israel, it's based upon a percentage for the entire population. Mm-hmm. It's not certain people give 0, certain people give 50%, which is what we have in America. Instead, it's everyone gives 10%. In their case, a couple of different taxes, and then we've talked about before, but in Genesis chapters, the end of Genesis, much of the exact chapter, I think it's 48, 49, but Joseph becomes this ruler in Egypt, and because he's the one who has all the food, he begins to buy things from the people until he owns all the possessions, and then buys the people as slaves, and then he allows them to work and to keep 80% of what they earn, and he takes 20%. So, which is an extreme amount, right? You're taking twice as much as what God would demand from his tithe, and yet the slaves back then are treated better in terms of the amount being taken than some Americans today, right? And of course, things are taken, and then you get back certain things that you didn't want in the first place after it goes through the hands of 10,000 bureaucrats. So I would just say again, you joyfully pay your taxes, right? God calls you to do that. We have a government, but we're talking about voting and what should be the proper way of doing it. No, we should, even though I'm in the lower tax brackets, I should not be voting for other people to pay all of my bills. That's not how it should work. So that's to both parties, though.
Right. Thanks for the clarification on that. Next topic to talk about, and this is one that we hear a lot about, especially from one party in particular, is immigration and what do we do about the border? Yes.
Well, it's funny because we hear a lot about it from both parties now, and they're trying to sound the exact same. It's very, very odd, right? So Republican Party, their number one item on their list of 20 items in terms of their priorities, number one is seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. Number 2, carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. You're probably laughing.
In all caps.
Yeah, it's in all caps. They're all in all caps. And then to compare that to the Democratic platform, on his first day in office, President Biden sent Congress legislation to secure our border, fix our immigration system, and provide a pathway to citizenship for dreamers and others. Yes. So this, I I guess we talked for a while about how this administration has definitely not secured our border. It's anything but secure right now. But the emphasis for both is on, okay, we're securing the border, or we're going to secure the border. Now, again, I'd say this is one of the basic biblical roles of government, is to make sure that we know what are the limits of our country and keeping out people that we do not want to be here. That's completely an unacceptable thing. Again, a couple of years ago, we heard a lot more about it, how this was a cruel thing. It was unfair. It was maybe even elitist for Americans to have so much wealth and to not allow others in to sort of share that wealth. But it's just not reality. Then the job of the government is to provide freedom and to ensure, opportunities for its own citizens, not for the entire world. And so there is a scope of government, and so it's completely acceptable to protect our borders and to want that to be an orderly system. And of course, the amount of drugs that we have coming over the border, and different kinds of issues related to millions of people coming into a country that we don't know who they are. There's obviously massive issues here. So at this point, both parties talk about it a lot, and you're hearing a lot from Kamala about securing the border and stuff. So we can hope either way that will happen. Because again, we have people being trafficked over the border. You have so much sexual abuse happening, so much trafficking of kids happening. There's so many terrible things when you just have this wide open holes in the border wherever people are coming in and out. So, well, mostly in.
Yeah, I guess maybe the difference is how each party proposes to actually fix that problem.
Yeah.
They both acknowledge that something should change, but have different solutions about.
Yes. Well, I mean, again, I think right now you're hearing very similar solutions, right? Like having a wall and security and things like this. You hear that from both. Historically, it's been much more what the Democrats have said is more kind of open borders. They wouldn't say that, but a little bit more open, and pathway to citizenship. So meaning, how do we take those who are here and get them to become citizens so they can pay taxes and all these things? Whereas obviously the largest deportation operation in American history is a very different thing.
Right.
So, and that would come down to, a lot of it come down to, the practical implications, because it's neither wrong to grant someone citizenship or to deport them if they're here illegally. You would have the right to do either one.
Yeah.
Which one is going to encourage righteousness, is going to encourage the rule of law? We've had so much of this kind of, hey, if you come into America, you're going to get free things. And if you sort of say, if you come in and you do it illegally, we will make you a citizen. It's one of the greatest gifts you could possibly be given in our world today, is to be an American citizen. Well, then expect to have a lot more law breaking. So there's some huge problems with that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So biblical justice would uphold the current law and also protect against or discourage, or have a deterrent to future law breaking. I don't see how that policy does. Let's talk abortion.
Yeah.
A good, positive issue. I was actually surprised at how little the Republican platform mentions abortion at all. I was pretty shocked by this.
Yeah, it might be, Trump's kind of softening position on that, potentially.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And then also LGBTQ stuff, right? There's almost no mention of it. So here's what the Republicans say. They say Republicans will protect and defend a vote of the people from within the states on the issue of life. So it's kind of an easy punt to the states. Roe v. Wade's been overturned, so let the states decide on it. We proudly stand for families in life. We believe that the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are therefore free to pass laws protecting those rights. Well, if there's a right to life, then you can pass just laws or unjust laws. So it's kind of just punting it to the states. They do say we will oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF. So I'm glad that they're saying oppose late-term abortion. Ethically speaking and biblically speaking, there really isn't a big difference between an early-term abortion and late-term abortion. There is, in the sense of this baby is basically fully formed. You can see it, right? It could survive outside the womb around 24, 25 weeks. So very early on. So absolutely, late-term abortion ban should be common sense even for those who aren't Christian. I mean, it's really wild that's not a thing. Whereas the Democrats' posture on this is they essentially, in their platform, they have zero restriction on abortion as part of their platform. So I don't love everything about the Republican. I really wish they would say completely, our goal is to completely eradicate this evil of abortion in our country. The Bible's so clear about this. You can see our other videos on abortion where we talk about this at length. But listen to the Democrats. They say Trump, they call it reproductive freedom. So a very different phrasing even, kind of Orwellian. But Trump's Supreme Court appointees overturned Roe v. Wade, eliminating a fundamental constitutional right and denying women across the nation the right to choose. So, of course, they're phrasing it as the right to choose. They're saying that they will make Roe the law of the land. So bring back Roe v. Wade, which allows abortion, at least to the early pregnancy, across the nation as a fundamental right. They say that they will repeal the Hyde Amendment, which would restrict funds, federal tax funds, from going to pay for abortions. And so there you go. So you potentially will have your tax money going to pay for the murder of children. So that's a very extreme stance. And again, there's no restriction that they have on it. If it's the right to choose, if it's completely between a woman and her doctor, then logically speaking, from that point of view, there should be no restriction. So it's a wild. So there's a big difference here. Again, I wish Republicans were much more, upfront and aggressive with this. Right now, this just sadly is not a politically winning issue for the Republicans. And so, being politicians, they are moderating their views.
They're trying to win.
Yeah, which I understand. That is part of the job of a politician is to. But for us as Christians, we should say abortion is wicked. Yeah. And the fact that we're allowing this to become more and more normal, to even kind of hedge the way we speak about this life in the womb is crazy. And there's no greater power imbalance that I can think of, but then between an adult, right, and a baby in the womb that has no ability at all to protect itself. And the fact that we are destroying life and doing it because it benefits us, it benefits the economy, whatever, it's wicked.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be afraid to say that. Let's talk about LGBTQ+. So as I said, there's almost no mention of LGBTQ+ issues in the Republican platform, which is kind of surprising. I guess maybe the 2020 platform was the same. I didn't read it, but typically this is something that we're saying, hey, we're not in favor of this movement. And then the Democrats are saying we are in favor of this movement. So here's only mention really of anything related to that. It's related to transgenderism. And this is number 17 on their list of 20 items is keep men out of women's sports.
That's Republicans,
sorry, to clarify. It says Republicans will end left-wing gender insanity. So I love, I love that language. Again, it's like Trump language. We will keep men out of women's sports, ban taxpayer funding for sex change surgeries, and stop taxpayer-funded schools from promoting gender transition, reverse Biden's radical rewrite of Title IX education regulations, and restore protection for women and girls. So we talked quite a bit about transgender issues. Again, if you had written this 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, no one would have disagreed with this. It wouldn't even have made sense as to why you were saying it. Because, of course, we shouldn't be paying for gender transitions. Of course, we shouldn't have people who are men in women's sports. But that is where we are today. So then compare that, though, to the Democrats here. It says, as President Biden has said, LGBTQI+, so they've added another letter to it, youth are some of the bravest people he knows, and he has made it a priority to fight for them. The administration is combating the dangerous and cruel practice of so-called, quote, conversion therapy. So this is really important because conversion therapy, it kind of is framed in terms of like what you hear in the media in terms of like coercive or even, harmful therapy, like you're hooking someone up to electrodes and shocking them and trying to turn them from being gay through that kind of hurtful therapy. That's really not what it means. It just means you're trying to help someone who is currently experiencing attraction to the same sex to change. And very often people don't want the temptations that they have. And so helping them to turn from that temptation towards what God would have for them is a good thing. So imagine if we called drug rehab programs conversion therapy. If we just said you're simply trying to convert someone from doing drugs or having a draw toward alcohol to something healthier, and they said that was bad. Well, we would say, biblically speaking, this is a good thing. It's a good thing to help someone turn away from their sin and toward a righteous life. And so this idea of banning the cruel practice of conversion therapy is very concerning. It should concern all Christians. And we've seen legislation passed in Canada banning conversion therapy, quote unquote. And I think we have more protections legally and constitutionally in America, thankfully. But that clearly is a push that is going to be continuing to grow in our country.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's more on this, but this short statement we had in front of us, I mean, basically just gives a full affirmation of that with no limits, it seems like.
Yeah, so it is very extensive, very extensive.
Yeah.
So we only have a couple seconds here. So let's talk about, I just thought this was funny, the critical theory, the vast difference here. And this is one of the ones where the mask more kind of falls off. So for Republicans, they say cut federal funding for schools pushing critical race theory, radical gender ideology, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. The Democrat platform is very different, and it's funny because I won't read it, but the whole document starts off, the very first, like the intro page, is an acknowledgement of the tribes that used to live in Chicago on the land where they were gathering for the DNC. And so it goes through the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, the Potawatomi nations, and the Ho-Chunk. I won't read all of them, but it's just interesting, right? And so you see the critical theory mentality at the very beginning. And again, if you don't know much about that, go check out our series on how to destroy the world in 10 simple steps. But we'll leave it there. So hopefully this has given you just some helpful insight. Again, there's a lot more we could talk about, and we could talk about, okay, well, which candidate is actually going to do what they say they're going to do? That's a vital question. But we should in everything be thinking biblically, and especially when it comes to politics and our culture. Thanks so much for watching this video. We're uploading great biblical content every single week, so make sure you subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment down below. We'd love to discuss with you. If you want to support us financially, there's a link in the description of this video. Thanks so much.